I woke up early that morning just like any other day and started getting ready for work. As I was getting dressed, I heard this deafening trumpet sound coming from outside. It was so loud I thought it might be some kind of construction going on, or maybe a train passing by, but it sounded too otherworldly for that. I went to my window and saw the sky turning this deep shade of red like nothing I had ever seen before. The clouds were swirling and forming these crazy patterns that I couldn't make sense of. I felt a sense of panic start to set in as I saw people running around outside, some of them looking up at the sky in disbelief, others just trying to get as far away as possible. As I looked up, I saw a bright white horse galloping across the sky. The rider wore a shining crown and held a bow in his hand. He looked noble and proud, but there was something unsettling about him. It was as if he was radiating power and authority, but it also felt like a warning. Then a red horse appeared, ridden by a fierce-looking man with a sword. The horse seemed to be breathing fire and smoke, and the rider was covered in blood. I felt a sense of dread wash over me as I saw him like he was a symbol of violence and war. Next came a black horse ridden by a figure with a pair of scales in his hand. The horse looked emaciated and weak, and the rider seemed to be measuring out food and prices. I felt a sense of desperation and fear, like something was coming to take away our basic needs and leave us struggling to survive. Finally, a pale horse appeared, ridden by a figure that was almost skeletal in appearance. It felt like he was death himself come to take the souls of the living. I felt a deep sense of sorrow and grief as I watched him ride across the sky. The four horsemen were a vision unlike any I had ever seen before, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were a warning of something terrible to come. As the horsemen rode by, people around me started to panic. Some were screaming and running, while others were standing in shock and disbelief. I could hear cries of anguish and fear, and the smell of burning flesh filled the air. It was as if the very fabric of reality had been ripped apart, and we were all caught in the middle of it. The atmosphere had changed completely. It was like a thick fog had descended upon us, making it difficult to see more than a few feet in front of me. The sky had turned a deep red color, and I could hear strange noises like the wailing of ghosts or the howling of demons. I saw people falling to their knees, pleading for mercy and forgiveness. Some were calling out to their gods, while others were simply weeping in despair. The sense of dread and hopelessness was palpable, and I felt it deep in my own soul. I myself was stunned and speechless, unable to comprehend the enormity of what was happening. It was like nothing I had ever seen before, and I was filled with a sense of dread and foreboding. The world was changing before my very eyes, and I had no idea what was to come next. As the horsemen rode on and the world around me descended into chaos, I found myself grasping at any knowledge I had of the end times. I had always known about Jesus and the biblical prophecies of the apocalypse, but they had never felt real to me until now. I remember thinking, what comes after the horsemen? And then like a bolt of lightning it hit me, the earthquake. The ground beneath my feet began to shake violently, and I stumbled and fell to the ground. All around me, people were screaming and running for cover, trying to escape the wrath of God. The sound was deafening like thunderous booms that shook the very foundations of the earth. And the smells, I'll never forget the smell of the smoke and the sulfur like nothing I had ever experienced before. In that moment, I realized that everything I thought I knew about the world had been turned upside down. The apocalypse was here, and I was living it, and I knew that I needed to turn to God and find my faith before it was too late. As the seventh seal was opened, there was silence in heaven for what felt like an eternity. I couldn't hear anything, not a single sound, even my own heartbeat. The silence was so thick that it was deafening, and it seemed to swallow everything up. It was as if the whole universe was holding its breath. Then suddenly 7 angels appeared before me. They were holding 7 trumpets, and I could see the light reflecting off the golden metal as they raised them to their lips. When they blew their trumpets, the silence was shattered by the most deafening sound I had ever heard. It was like the sound of 1,000 thunderclaps all happening at once. With the sound of the trumpets, I felt a blast of wind that seemed to come from all directions at once. It was like a hurricane hitting me, and I had to hold on to something to keep from being blown away. The wind was so strong that it tore trees out of the ground and sent cars flying through the air. As the wind died down, I saw that the first angel had poured out his trumpet, and there was hail and fire mingled with blood raining down from the sky. The hailstones were huge, bigger than I had ever seen, and they were falling so fast and hard that they were smashing through roofs and windows. The fire was bright and hot, like standing right next to a bonfire, and it was setting everything it touched ablaze. The blood was the worst part, though. It was thick and dark, and it seemed to be sticking to everything it touched. It was like a nightmare come to life. The second angel blew his trumpet, and a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. The sea became as blood, and all the creatures in it died. The smell of burning flesh and blood was overpowering, and I felt like I was going to be sick. The sea was churning and boiling, and the water turned red with blood. I could see dead fish floating on the surface, and sharks thrashing around in the water, dying. As the third angel blew his trumpet, a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch. It fell on a third of the rivers and springs of water, and the waters turned bitter. I could taste the bitterness in my mouth, and it was like nothing I had ever tasted before. It was like poison, and I knew that if I drank it, I would die. The fourth angel blew his trumpet, and the sun was struck, and a third of the moon and a third of the stars, so that a third of their light was darkened. It was like a partial eclipse, but it didn't go away. It was like the sun and the moon and the stars were all dying, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. As the fifth angel blew his trumpet, I saw a star fall from heaven to the earth. It was like a burning torch, and it fell on the rivers and springs of water. The name of the star was Wormwood, and a third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it was made bitter. As the sixth angel blew his trumpet, I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar before God. It said, "Release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates." And the four angels were released who had been prepared for the hour, day, month, and year to kill a third of mankind. The sight of the angels descending upon the earth was terrifying. They were huge like mountains, and their faces were twisted with rage. They carried swords that shone like the sun.